You give and you give. Time, effort, and support. You say yes when others hesitate. You go the extra mile, not because you have to, but because it feels right. Yet somehow, the more generous you are, the less people seem to appreciate it. Worse, they begin to expect it. Ever found yourself wondering why the kindness that once made you valuable now makes you invisible? Why does being too kind often lead to being overlooked, underappreciated, or even disrespected? If kindness is a virtue, why does it sometimes feel like a burden? And more importantly, how can you stop this cycle without becoming cold or indifferent? This isn't just theory, it's happening to people like you every day. My friend Mark is living proof. A hardworking professional, a devoted father, and the guy everyone turns to for help. He thought kindness was his greatest strength until he realized it was turning him into an afterthought. His story is one you might recognize because chances are you've been in his shoes. What happened to Mark? And more importantly, how can you ensure your kindness commands respect, not exploitation? Stay with me because today we're breaking down the real reason kindness makes people take you for granted and how to turn it into your greatest power using timeless Stoic wisdom. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like your kindness was being used against you? Let's talk about it. 1. Why overgiving reduces your value. People say kindness is a virtue, but what they don't tell you is that too much of it can make you invisible. The paradox is unsettling. The more you offer, the less you're appreciated. It starts small. You help a friend once, and they're grateful. The second time, they nod in thanks. By the third, it's expected. And when you finally hesitate, that's when you see it. The subtle shift in their tone, the look of disappointment, the quiet resentment as if you've broken an unspoken contract. This happens in families, friendships, and workplaces. The problem isn't that kindness is bad. It's that unlimited kindness makes people stop seeing its value. Human nature is wired to respect scarcity. What's always available is easily ignored. When you make your generosity limitless, people stop perceiving it as generosity at all. It becomes background noise, something that just exists, not something to be grateful for. And when that happens, the line between respect and expectation disappears. Mark didn't see it at first. He built his life on the idea that being available, being dependable, was the best way to show love and build strong relationships. He was the man who never said no. The guy who covered extra shifts, who stayed late to help colleagues, who never turned down a favor. His friends saw him as the one who'd always be there. His family leaned on him for everything. It felt good, at least at first. He thought he was building goodwill, strengthening bonds, and proving himself as a reliable man. Then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, exhausted after weeks of working late, Mark decided to turn down a last-minute request from a friend who needed help moving. It wasn't a big deal, at least he thought it wasn't, but the reaction caught him off guard. Instead of understanding, his friend scoffed. "Seriously? You can't help this one time?" It wasn't said in anger, but there was something beneath the words. Disappointment, annoyance, as if Mark had broken an obligation rather than declined a request. That night, he started noticing things he had ignored before. The way his colleagues handed him extra work with a casual assumption that he'd handle it. The way his family barely acknowledged his sacrifices. The realization hit him. His kindness was no longer seen as a gift. It had become an expectation. And that expectation had stripped it of its value. Maybe you've been there too. You cover for a coworker one time. The second time, they don't even ask properly. They just assume. At home, you take on responsibilities without question, believing it's the right thing to do. But over time, instead of gratitude, you get silence. And when you finally push back, you're met with resistance. Not because people are unkind, but because you trained them to expect your generosity without limits. This is where Stoicism offers clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your kindness is given without self-respect and awareness, it stops being a choice and becomes an obligation. And once that happens, you're no longer offering something valuable, you're just filling a role others have assigned to you. Mark had a choice to make. He could stay trapped in the cycle, or he could change the rules. He didn't announce a dramatic shift. He didn't lecture anyone on how they took him for granted. He simply stopped saying yes to everything. The next time his friend asked for a favor, Mark responded differently. "I can't this time," he said. No explanation. No apology. He didn't offer an alternative or make up for it in another way. The reaction? His friend hesitated, then brushed it off, moving on to find someone else. At work, when colleagues dumped extra projects on him, Mark started asking, "Who else is available for this? Or is this in my job scope?" He kept his tone neutral, his expression steady. At first, people were surprised. Then they adjusted. At home, he made a quiet decision. One night a week, he would do something just for himself. No favors, no problem solving, no last-minute rescues. It felt uncomfortable at first, but then something happened. People started respecting his time. This wasn't an overnight fix. Some relationships faded, but the ones that remained, they were stronger, healthier, and built on mutual respect, not silent expectations. The solution is not to stop being kind, but to be strategic with your kindness. Think of it like currency. If you hand out money freely without any limits, it becomes worthless. But when generosity is given mindfully, intentionally, and with purpose, it retains its power. The scarcity effect. People value what is rare. Your time, energy, and help should be no exception. Here's the shift. Instead of offering kindness unconditionally, start offering it deliberately. Don't say yes just because it's expected. Say yes when it aligns with your values. Say no when it costs you your peace. And watch how people start respecting your time again. And if you think saying no will push people away, ask yourself, do you want relationships that only exist because you're constantly giving? Or do you want the respect that comes from knowing your kindness is a privilege, not a given? The moment you stop overgiving, you'll see the truth. The people who value you for who you are, not what you provide, will still be there. The ones who leave, they were never there for you in the first place. Now let's talk about another place where unlimited kindness backfires. Your career. Because the workplace is where overgiving doesn't just make you invisible, it keeps you stuck. 2. Why overworking makes you invisible at work. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that hard work speaks for itself. That the first one in, the last one out gets rewarded. If you just push harder, stay later, and take on more, people will notice. But here's the truth. They won't. At least, not in the way you think. In the workplace, overworking doesn't make you indispensable. It makes you a tool. Someone who's always available, always willing, always covering for others. It sounds noble, but in reality, it does one thing. It lowers your value. You're not seen as a leader, but as an endless resource. The more you do, the more people expect you to do. And when you finally stop, when you say no, that's when you see who actually respected you. I learned this the hard way. In my first job out of college, I wanted to prove myself. I was the guy who never turned down a task, never questioned extra assignments, and never said no when a manager asked for just a little more. I worked late, skipped breaks, and volunteered for projects that weren't even mine. I thought it was a strategy: stand out, work harder than everyone else, and eventually I'd get recognized. And I did get recognized, but not in the way I had hoped. One day, a big opportunity opened up, a leadership role. I thought, this is it. This is why I've been working so hard. But when the promotion came, they gave it to someone else. Not because they were better, not because they worked harder, but because they weren't stuck in the role of the workhorse. The moment I saw the truth, everything clicked. I wasn't respected for my effort. I was just the guy they knew they could pile work onto. And the worst part? I had trained them to treat me that way. Maybe you've experienced this. Maybe you're the one in the office who always picks up the slack. Maybe you take on extra tasks without complaint, thinking it will pay off. But deep down, you know what happens next. It doesn't pay off. It just becomes expected. The respect doesn't grow. The recognition doesn't come. All that happens is that your workload increases, while others do less and advance faster. Stoicism teaches that we should not let external validation define us. Epictetus reminds us that we must distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. Overworking is within our control. But how do people perceive us? That is not. And when you allow your value to be dictated by endless work rather than strategic contribution, you lose control over your own worth. So I made a shift. I stopped volunteering for everything. I stopped being available 24/7. I started asking questions instead of blindly accepting work. Is this part of my role? Who else can assist with this? What's the deadline priority? These weren't excuses, they were boundaries, and the response was immediate. Some people were frustrated, others were surprised, but the biggest change? I was no longer invisible. Let's apply this to your own situation. Imagine this. Tomorrow morning, you walk into work and your manager drops another last-minute task on you, assuming you'll handle it like always. But instead of immediately saying yes, you pause. You ask, is there anyone else available for this? Or would you like me to shift priorities for my current tasks? You say it with confidence, without hesitation. What do you think happens next? Maybe there's pushback. Maybe they try to guilt you. But over time, something shifts. They start distributing work more fairly. They stop assuming you'll always say yes. They begin to see you not as an endless worker, but as someone who manages their value. This is the strategic no, the ability to decline without fear, without guilt, without apology. It's not about refusing responsibility, it's about making sure the work you do aligns with your values. And if you're afraid of how people will react, ask yourself, do you want to be respected for what you contribute, or used for what you can be burdened with? The workplace will always have people who do less, but get more. Not because they're smarter, but because they understand one thing. Value is not determined by effort alone. It's determined by how well you manage your effort. So starting today, stop overworking yourself into invisibility. Say yes strategically. Say no with confidence, and watch as people start treating you differently. 3. When your support becomes an obligation. There's a fine line between kindness and obligation. At first, people appreciate the support you give. They thank you for being there, for always listening, for helping them through hard times. But slowly, something shifts. The gratitude fades, the requests increase, and before you know it, your kindness is no longer seen as generosity. It's just part of the routine. And when you finally hesitate, when you finally need something in return, you're met with frustration instead of understanding. This happens in friendships, families, and even in the workplace. You become the one everyone turns to when they need advice, a favor, or emotional support. You're the problem solver, the fixer, the emotional crutch. But when you need help, silence. Because your kindness has been rebranded as duty, not a choice. And duty isn't appreciated, it's just expected. I had a friend who fell into this trap. He was the reliable one, the guy who always answered calls at midnight, who always picked up the tab, who always listened without complaint. When someone needed a ride to the airport at dawn, they called him. When they needed advice on their problems, he was the first they texted. At first, he liked being that person. He felt needed, important. He thought he was building deep, lasting connections. But one day, he hit a breaking point. He was dealing with his own personal crisis. Something heavy, something that had been weighing on him for weeks. And for the first time, he needed someone to be there for him. He reached out to the same people he had always supported. And you know what happened? Excuses. Delay. Some didn't even respond. They were too busy, too tired, too occupied with their own lives. That moment changed him. He realized that the relationships he had built were not built on mutual support. They were built on one-sided dependency. His kindness hadn't created stronger bonds. It had created a dynamic where people saw him as a resource, not as a person with his own needs. Maybe this sounds familiar. Maybe you're always the one listening to your friends' problems, but when you need to talk, nobody seems available. Maybe you're the one mediating family conflicts, always smoothing things over, but when you need space, they act like you're being selfish. This is where Stoicism offers perspective. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. We assume that if we stop being the constant giver, people will resent us. That if we stop fixing everything, relationships will crumble. But here's the truth. Relationships built on one-sided giving were never strong to begin with. True bonds are built on mutual respect and reciprocity, not silent sacrifice. So how do you break the cycle? It starts with shifting how you give. Stop offering unlimited emotional labor to people who never give back. Stop saying yes out of guilt. And most importantly, start assessing who truly values you and who only values what you provide. Let's put you in a different situation. Imagine this. A friend calls again with another problem. You've listened a dozen times before, always offering advice, always being there. But this time, instead of immediately stepping in, you pause. You ask, what do you think you should do? Or have you tried handling it on your own first? You shift the responsibility back to them. At first, they might be surprised, maybe even frustrated. But over time, something happens. The dynamic changes. The endless cycle of dependency breaks, and the people who truly respect you, they'll understand. This is the emotional ROI rule. Invest your emotional energy only where it's valued, only where it's reciprocated. Not because you're keeping score, but because you deserve relationships that don't just take but also give. If your kindness is leading to exhaustion, it's not kindness, it's self-neglect. And if you think constantly fixing other people's problems makes them value you more, think again. The more you solve for them, the less they solve for themselves. This is not about withholding kindness. It's about offering it wisely. The people who truly appreciate you will respect the change. The ones who disappear, they were never really there for you in the first place. And speaking of relationships, let's talk about something even more damaging: how over-accommodation can ruin attraction and make you seem weak instead of valued. For over-accommodation kills attraction. There's a reason why being too nice in relationships often backfires. At first, it feels like the right thing to do. Always being available, agreeing to everything, putting the other person's needs above your own. But the more you accommodate, the less you're respected. The more you sacrifice, the less you're valued. It's an unsettling truth. People are drawn to those they respect, not those who are endlessly agreeable. You've seen it happen. A man in a relationship, eager to keep things smooth, avoids conflict at all costs. He changes his opinions to match hers, rearranges his schedule to fit her needs, and prioritizes her happiness over his own. At first, she appreciates it. She might even say, "You're so different from other guys." But over time, something shifts. She starts responding later to his texts. She's less engaged in conversations. She seems bored. And when he finally notices and asks what's wrong, she says something vague, something he wasn't expecting. "I don't know. I just don't feel the same way anymore." I had a college friend who went through this exact scenario. He was the textbook definition of the nice guy. Thoughtful, caring, and always puts his girlfriend first. He did everything right, or so he thought. He planned dates around her schedule, picked restaurants she liked, and even changed small things about himself to make her happy. But as time went on, she started losing interest. One day, out of nowhere, she broke up with him. When he asked why, she hesitated before saying, "I just don't feel that spark anymore." That crushed him. He couldn't understand. He had been the perfect boyfriend. He never argued, never made things difficult, never put himself first. But that was exactly the problem. He had erased himself. He wasn't a man with his own opinions, boundaries, and standards. He was just an extension of what she wanted. And deep down, she couldn't respect that. Maybe you felt this too. Maybe you've held back your real thoughts to avoid arguments. Maybe you've said yes when you wanted to say no, just to keep the peace. Maybe you've tried to prove your worth through constant acts of service. But in doing so, you created a version of yourself that wasn't real. A version that was safe, predictable, and forgettable. Stoicism teaches that true strength isn't in pleasing others, it's in standing firm in your values. Epictetus said, "How long will you wait before you demand the best of yourself?" Being agreeable isn't what builds respect. Respect comes from having boundaries, standards, and a strong sense of self. So how do you shift? Imagine this. You're in a relationship, and your partner asks you to cancel plans with your friends to spend time together. Instead of immediately saying yes, you pause. You respond with, "I already have plans, but let's find another time." You say it without guilt, without fear of upsetting them. At first they might be surprised, but over time something happens. They start valuing your time more. They recognize that you're a person with your own life, not someone who just bends to fit theirs. And that creates attraction. This is the reciprocity rule. Your kindness should be met with equal effort and respect. If you're the only one constantly adjusting, giving, and proving your worth, the balance is broken. A relationship isn't built on one person sacrificing while the other benefits. It's built on mutual respect, shared values, and equal investment. If you've been over-accommodating, start making small changes. Speak your mind, even if it's uncomfortable. Prioritize your own needs, even if it feels selfish at first. And most importantly, remember this: you don't earn love by disappearing into someone else's world. You earn love by standing strong on your own. 5. Stop saying yes when you want to say no. There's a moment of hesitation before you say yes. You feel it in your gut. Something is off. You don't want to do it. You're tired, you're busy, but you say yes anyway, because it's easier than dealing with the guilt, because you don't want to seem rude, because you're worried about how they'll react if you say no. And so it keeps happening. You say yes when you want to say no. You take on tasks that aren't your responsibility. You help when you don't have the energy. You inconvenience yourself to make life easier for others. But here's the irony: the more you give in, the less they appreciate it. Instead of gratitude, you get expectations. Instead of respect, you get demands. And when you finally say no, that's when you see the truth. People aren't upset because you said no. They're upset because they were so used to you saying yes. A close friend of mine learned this the hard way. Every morning, he picked up his cousin and drove her to work. What started as an occasional favor became a daily obligation. She was never on time, always running late, always needing just a few more minutes. And when she finally got in the car, it wasn't a simple ride. She had requested to stop for coffee, adjust the air conditioning, and turn down the music. My friend never complained. He told himself he was being helpful, that family comes first, and that this was the right thing to do. But the day he finally spoke up, things shifted. One morning, exhausted from his own work schedule, he told her she needed to be ready on time, or he wouldn't wait. She rolled her eyes. The next day, when she was late again, he left without her. The reaction? She was furious. Not grateful for all the times he had driven her, not appreciative of his patience, just angry that he had finally set a boundary. This is what happens when you say yes out of guilt. You don't build respect. You don't create stronger relationships. You teach people that your needs don't matter. And once they believe that, they stop considering them altogether. Now imagine this. You're at work, drowning in tasks, and someone asks for just a small favor. You know you don't have time, but you hesitate. You don't want to disappoint them, so you agree. And then it happens again and again. And soon, you're not just handling your own work, you're handling theirs, too. The cycle continues because you're afraid to break it. But Stoicism teaches that control over your own actions is the only thing within your power. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That means learning to be okay with disappointing people who have grown comfortable taking advantage of you. Here's how you take back control. The next time you feel that hesitation, pause. Recognize it for what it is, not guilt, but a warning sign that you're about to betray yourself. Instead of immediately agreeing, say, "I can't right now." No apology, no long explanation, just a firm, steady response. And watch what happens next. Some people will respect it, others will push back, and a few will walk away. Let them. Because if your relationships are built on your inability to say no, they were never built on real respect in the first place. If you keep saying yes when you want to say no, you will wake up one day resenting the very people you once wanted to help. And that resentment? It's not their fault, it's yours. Because you had the power to set limits. You just chose not to use it. But that changes today. Because the ability to say no isn't about pushing people away. It's about making sure the people around you value your time, your effort, and your presence. And when you get that right, that's when kindness becomes power, not weakness. And speaking of boundaries, one of the biggest challenges people face is setting limits without feeling like a bad person. So let's talk about that next. 6. Setting boundaries without feeling like a bad person. Guilt. That's what stops most people from setting boundaries. You don't want to disappoint anyone. You don't want to seem selfish. You tell yourself that being available, being dependable, and being the one who always says yes is what makes you a good person. But is it? Or is it just making you a person who's easy to take advantage of? People mistake endless availability for kindness, but in reality, kindness without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. When you constantly put others ahead of yourself, they don't admire your generosity. They grow comfortable with it. And when you finally push back, that's when you see the truth. They weren't valuing you. They valued what you did for them. Like my friend who drove his cousin to work every morning. What started as an act of kindness became an expectation. And when he finally set a boundary, she wasn't grateful for all the times he had helped. She was just upset that she had lost a convenience. That's what happens when you don't establish limits from the beginning. People don't remember all the times you said yes. They only notice the first time you say no. Maybe you've experienced this in your own way. Picture this. You're always the one covering extra shifts at work. Not because you want to, but because it's easier than saying no. Your boss knows you'll do it, so they don't even ask anymore. They just assume. And at first, you take pride in being reliable. But over time, something shifts. The respect isn't there. The gratitude disappears. And one day, when you finally say you can't, they're frustrated as if you've done something wrong, because you trained them to expect your time without limits. Or maybe it's happening in your personal life. A friend who always borrows money but never repays it. A family member who constantly asks for favors but never offers the same in return. At first you tell yourself it's not a big deal, that it's just who you are, you help people. But over time you start to notice the imbalance, and when you finally ask for something in return, they hesitate. Suddenly they're busy, suddenly they don't have time. And that's when you realize you weren't helping, you were enabling. And here's the real danger. When you don't set boundaries, you don't just lose respect, you lose yourself. You start neglecting your own needs, you stop prioritizing your own well-being. And eventually, you become exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. Resentment builds up, not because people took from you, but because you never stopped them. This is where Stoicism offers clarity. Seneca once wrote, "If you do not know to which port you sail, no wind is favorable." Without boundaries, you drift. You become whatever people need you to be. You sacrifice your own direction for the comfort of others, and in doing so, you lose yourself. Setting boundaries isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's about defining what you will and won't tolerate, not for others, but for yourself. And when you do this, something powerful happens. The right people stay, the wrong people leave, and the ones who remain, they respect you more, not less. So how do you start? The next time someone asks for a favor, pause. Instead of immediately agreeing, ask yourself, does this align with my priorities? Am I saying yes because I want to, or because I'm afraid to say no? If it's the latter, try this. Say no, without over-explaining, without justifying, just a simple, steady response. Now, let's put you in this situation. Imagine you're in a group of friends, and one of them always relies on you to plan everything, whether it's dinners, trips, or meetups. You've done it for years. You're good at it. But one day you decide to step back. You wait to see if someone else takes the initiative. You wait to see if anyone appreciates what you've always done. And what happens? No one steps up. No one even notices. And suddenly, you realize the effort was never mutual. It was never truly seen. Or maybe you're in a relationship where you're always the one adjusting your time, your energy, your priorities to make things easier for your partner. You never complain. You never ask for more. You just keep giving. But one day, when you finally express what you need, they react as if you're being difficult. Not because your needs are unreasonable, but because they're simply not used to you having any. This is why boundaries matter. Not just to protect your time, but to protect your dignity. If you keep living for the comfort of others, you'll wake up one day resenting them. Not because they took from you, but because you never stopped them. But when you set boundaries, that's when everything changes. Because now your kindness is respected, your time is valued, and your presence, it's a privilege, not an expectation. Boundaries don't push people away. They filter out the ones who were never truly there for you. And that's a lesson worth learning. And when you master this, something else becomes clear. Kindness, when given without confidence, is mistaken for weakness. And that's why next, we need to talk about how to make the people respect your generosity instead of exploiting it. 7. How to make people respect your generosity. Kindness should be a gift, not a weakness. But too often, generosity, when given without intention, leads to one outcome: exploitation. People assume it, expect it, take it for granted. And when that happens, kindness no longer elevates you, it diminishes you. The problem isn't kindness itself. It's kindness without self-respect. When you give without consideration, when you say yes to everything, help without limits, and never expect anything in return, you send a message. My time, my energy, my generosity are not valuable. And when people don't see value in what you give, they don't appreciate it. Think about it. If a restaurant gave away free meals every day with no conditions, people wouldn't treasure the food. They'd come to expect it. But when something is earned, when it is given with purpose, it carries weight. Generosity should be intentional. Given at the right time, in the right place, to the right people. When it is, it creates deeper connections, genuine gratitude, and mutual respect. When it isn't, it leads to resentment, entitlement, and emotional exhaustion. Imagine yourself in two different situations. First, the right kind of kindness. A close friend is struggling financially. He never asks for help, but you know he needs it. You offer to cover a bill, expecting nothing in return. He resists at first, but eventually he accepts. A few weeks later, he gets back on his feet and pays you back. Not just the money, but in effort, in loyalty, in gratitude. Your kindness strengthened the relationship. It meant something because it was intentional. Now the wrong kind of kindness. You have an old acquaintance who always seems to be in trouble. Every time they need money, they turn to you. At first you help because you want to, but then it becomes a pattern. They never change their behavior, never take responsibility. And one day when you finally say no, they act as if you've wronged them. Not because they valued your kindness, but because they expected it. That's the difference. One act of kindness builds respect, the other creates dependence. This is where Stoicism provides clarity. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." The same applies to generosity. True generosity doesn't mean giving endlessly, it means giving wisely. So how do you ensure your kindness is respected? First, assess who deserves it. Not everyone does. Generosity should be reserved for those who appreciate it and those who don't take it for granted. If someone expects your help but never reciprocates, step back. If someone only values you when they need something, walk away. Second, give with boundaries. When you give, do it on your terms, not out of guilt. Not because you feel obligated, but because it aligns with your values. If someone asks for help, ask yourself, am I giving because I want to, or because I'm afraid to say no? If it's the latter, reconsider. Third, never let generosity replace self-respect. You can be kind and firm at the same time. You can help people without losing yourself in the process. If your kindness isn't valued, redirect it to those who will respect it. But there's another important factor in ensuring that your generosity commands respect: the way you deliver it. When you give, don't over-apologize, don't downplay your effort, and don't act as if it's a minor thing. Too often, people say things like, "Oh, it's no big deal," or "Don't worry about it." These phrases seem harmless, but they devalue the act. Instead, own your kindness. Say, "I'm happy to help," or "I believe in supporting people who are working hard." When you treat your own kindness with respect, others will too. And here's something else to remember. People respect generosity that comes from strength, not from a need for approval. If you give because you fear rejection, because you want people to like you, because you're hoping for something in return, whether it's validation or recognition, then your kindness becomes transactional. Transactional kindness is always met with disappointment. But when you give from a place of confidence, without expectation, without attachment, and most importantly, without compromising your own well-being, that's when kindness is respected. So if you want people to respect your generosity, don't make it unlimited. Make it intentional. Make it meaningful. Because kindness, when given with wisdom, isn't a weakness. It's power. And when you master this, something else becomes clear. Generosity without self-awareness can lead to self-betrayal. That's why next, we need to talk about how to align kindness with self-respect. 8. Aligning generosity with self-respect. There's a common mistake people make when it comes to kindness. They assume that being generous means giving without conditions, without limits, and without expecting anything in return. But what happens when kindness is given without self-awareness? It leads to exhaustion, resentment, and self-betrayal. People respect kindness when it's balanced. But when generosity becomes an obligation, when it is given blindly, it's no longer seen as a meaningful gift. It's just another resource to be used. And when you finally stop giving, that's when you see the truth. The problem isn't generosity. It's generosity that doesn't align with your self-respect. When you give without boundaries, you're teaching people that your time, energy, and effort are less valuable than theirs. And over time, they start believing it too. Let's imagine two different scenarios. First, a moment where kindness is given wisely. You have a colleague who's been working hard, someone who's never asked for anything before, someone who genuinely needs help. They're struggling with a deadline, and without hesitation, you step in to assist. Not because you feel obligated, but because you respect their work ethic, because you know this act of kindness will be appreciated. And it is. They don't forget, they acknowledge your effort, and when the time comes, they return the favor. This is generosity with self-awareness. It builds respect, strengthens relationships, and makes kindness a force of connection, not a burden. Now a different situation. You're in a group project, and one person consistently slacks off. They contribute nothing, yet when the deadline approaches, they expect you to fill in the gaps. You've done it before, and they assume you'll do it again. At first, you think you're being helpful. But then it happens again, and soon it's no longer a favor, it's just expected. And when you finally say no, they act as if you're the one being unreasonable. This is what happens when kindness lacks boundaries. It creates dependency, not appreciation. Stoicism teaches that self-respect should never be sacrificed for the comfort of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This applies to kindness as well. If your generosity is causing you frustration, resentment, or exhaustion, it's a sign that it's not being given in alignment with your values. So how do you fix this? First, audit your generosity. Look at where you're giving your time, energy, and resources. Are you helping because it aligns with your principles? Or are you doing it to avoid guilt, to seek approval, or to keep the peace? If it's the latter, it's time to rethink your approach. Second, stop apologizing for your boundaries. You don't owe an explanation every time you decline to help. You don't need to justify why you're prioritizing yourself. A simple, "I can't commit to that right now," is enough. Strong people respect directness. Only those who seek to take advantage of you will be upset. Third, pay attention to reciprocity. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and balance. If you're always the one giving, always the one compromising, and never receiving anything in return, it's a sign that the relationship is one-sided. True generosity isn't about constantly giving, it's about giving where it creates value. Fourth, recognize when kindness is becoming self-sacrifice. If being kind is causing you stress, draining your energy, or making you feel taken for granted, something needs to change. True kindness should feel fulfilling, not exhausting. Finally, give from a place of strength, not obligation. When you offer kindness, do it deliberately. Do it because it reflects who you are, not because you're afraid of how people will react if you don't. If your kindness is being used against you, it's not kindness anymore. It's self-neglect. When you align generosity with self-respect, something powerful happens. The right people stay, the wrong ones fade, and suddenly your kindness means something again. It's no longer just expected, it's valued. And that's the difference between being respected and being taken for granted. Kindness should never come at the cost of your own dignity. And when you master that balance, you stop being just a giver. You become someone whose presence, time, and generosity command respect. Kindness, when given without thought, can become a burden. But when given with wisdom, strength, and self-respect, it transforms into something far more powerful, an act that elevates both you and those around you. What you've learned today is simple yet profound. Overgiving reduces your value. Overworking makes you invisible, and unlimited kindness turns into obligation rather than appreciation. People respect what they cannot take for granted, and the same applies to your time, energy, and generosity. So starting today, practice mindful kindness. Stop saying yes out of guilt. Stop overextending yourself to be liked. Stop giving to those who only take. Instead, align your generosity with your values. Give when it feels right, not when it's expected. Set boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect what makes you valuable. And if it feels difficult at first, remember what Marcus Aurelius taught. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You control how you give. You decide who is worthy of your effort. And when you make that shift, people will no longer just accept your kindness, they will respect it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your kindness was being taken for granted? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's learn from each other because wisdom grows when it's shared.